advertise it right and do it.
We could do a dry run on this. Okay, we're redirecting us to YouTube. We could do a dry run on this. Okay, we're redirecting us to YouTube. We do a dry run on this. Okay, we're redirecting us to YouTube. I hear a delay.
Oh, we're live on YouTube now.
I hear a delay. Okay. Okay, there's a bit of a delay, but we're on YouTube and we are live on YouTube. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Should you start over though? Because
We can't start.
Hi, I'm CK Cole. I'm with Lighthouse team of Fulton Grace Realty, and welcome to our third webinar, Targeting Your Purchase. We like to make sure that people who work with us have all the best possible tools available. So tonight, we're your tools. We're going to be talking about different real estate products, residential, and how people make choices, which one meets their needs best. So first, let me introduce the team. I'm the co-leader. Catherine Pabatao is our team leader. Maria Diaz and Keisha Williams. So I'll be talking about, well, Catherine will be talking about condominiums. I'm going to talk about townhomes and co-ops. Maria will be talking about single family homes, and Keisha will be talking about multi-units. So Maria, you want to talk a little bit about housekeeping before we get going?
yes, I mean, if we were streaming live on Facebook, we would like to be able to answer all questions. In this specific video, we are streaming live on YouTube, but if this is shared and you have an opportunity to put your questions in the comments, we will definitely get back to you. And that's pretty much it on our end now. So what I'd like to do is introduce you to Catherine as she delves into condos.
Well, thank you, Maria. My name is Catherine Pabatao. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I have been practicing real estate for about 13 years. And currently I live in the West Ridge / West Rogers Park neighborhood. And I own a condo here, and I've lived in my condo for 15 years. So this is why I'm going to be covering the topic on condos. So I just pulled up the definition of a condo online, and I thought this was a really good definition. So what is a condo? Well, condo is defined as one of a group of housing units where the homeowners own their individual unit space and all the dwellings share ownership of common use areas. So basically it is an apartment, but you own your apartment. And then there are areas called common areas where you would share expenses with the other condo owner. So common areas could be, in some buildings, it could be the laundry room. It could be the storage area, it could be the lobby. Those will be defined as common areas. And then there's limited common elements or areas, which are like the roof and the plumbing. But we will discuss that a little bit further on down the road, but not tonight. We won't delve too far into that. A lot of people want to know, what is a HOA and what does it cover? Well, HOA is Homeowners Association, or the common name of it in Chicago is assessments. So each condominium is different when it comes to assessments and HOA. The newer condominiums, the high-rise ones, their HOAs usually are a little bit higher because they cover a lot more things, such as a doorman. Some places have exercise facilities. Some have like a pool, some workout areas. So those, that is the reason why some of the HOAs are a lot more expensive. But typically, an HOA would just cover like water, scavenger, which is like your trash, maintenance, general, maintenance, and that's about it. And common insurance. So those are the four main things that it covers. And if your HOA decides to hire a property management company, then the HOA would cover that as well. And HOAs are just determined simply by a lot of things. They're determined by the age of the building, the expenses of the building. So there are different things that come into play when it comes to the HOA. So like I was saying, like with the high rises, they tend to be a little bit higher because you do get more amenities with the association. Another question that comes up typically are the bylaws. So basically it is just the constitution of the building. It's the rules and the regulations, what you can or cannot do, the limitations. Rather you can have pets. If you can have pets, what size can you have? What type of breed? Sometimes that is determined through the bylaws. Bylaws also cover if you can have rentals in the building. So if you are looking to maybe rent your place out down the road, make sure that your attorney and your realtor be able to find out that information if you're able to rent. I know there are a few buildings in Chicago, condominium buildings, where they don't allow you to rent at all. There's 100%, owner occupancy. So just make sure you kind of go over that depending upon your personal needs. You want to look over that as well. And there's some other things too that are in it. And I won't go too far into it. But bylaws are just basically just cover the rules and the regulations of the building. What should I be looking for when I purchase a condo? Well, there are a few things. One determining factor, a huge factor, is what type of financing do you have? FHA, they have limitations where, if you have an FHA loan, the building has to be FHA approved. So you might be approved for $250,000 in West Rogers Park, looking for a condo. That's a great price range. But unfortunately, there are not a lot of buildings that are FHA approved. The building can go about getting the building FHA approved if the seller is willing to do it. Oftentimes than not, they won't do it. It's a rigorous process. It's not to discourage you, but more than likely they won't do it. I have had it approved in the past, but the buyer had to pay for the expense. And that cost my buyer over $1,000, but she really wanted to be in the building. It took us about 3 months, but we were able to get that done. So can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Is it ideal? It's probably not ideal. So what else are you looking for when you purchase a condo? Well, it's your lifestyle and your amenities. I mean, what is it that you like to do? What are you looking for? I have friends that work downtown. So what was important to them was that they were close to the bus or the train line. So depending upon your work and your personal lifestyle, you want to make sure that you're finding a condo that kind of meets those transportation needs. It doesn't really make sense for someone to go to West Rogers Park if, they don't have a car and they're primarily on bus and train. So if you don't have a car, you may want to consider condominiums closer to a train or more on the east side when there's, a good transit system to get to and from work. If you have a car, you have a little bit more options. You probably want parking. A lot of people minimize the fact that they need parking. In Chicago, parking is very, very important, especially in the winter time. And you have a car, we have snow days, and they come and they clean the streets, and so you need parking. And then also, it's hard in some, depending upon the neighborhood, it might be a little bit more challenging to park. So you might be parking 2-3 blocks from your condo, and that's not really ideal. If you're going to buy something for resellability purposes, for the quality of life, you'd probably want to look for some kind of parking space. And if there's not a parking space, make sure have your realtor look for some, rental parking in the area. There's people that rent their garages. There's people across the alley that rent the garage out. Those options are available too. And even if you live by a school, sometimes after school hours, you could rent the parking lot as well. So those are some of the few things you want to look for when you're buying a condo. And some of the pros and the cons that I want to kind of discuss are that, well, for one, with the pros, it's, typically with the condo, you don't really have, it's low maintenance. So if you work a lot and you're not very handy, and, condominium might be a better fit for you. And it also depends upon your life stage. Some people want to want to purchase real estate. They don't have the means to get a single family home or a townhome, so they want to start with a condo. It's a great entry. It's a great entry into the real estate market. It's definitely good for investment. So, and for owner occupants. So if you want to start out purchasing a condo, it's good. And as long as you are able to possibly rent it down the road. That's why I had mentioned in the bylaws, just make sure you understand what the rental restrictions are. You could possibly rent it. Maybe life changes and, you get married, or you guys want to move up and get a house. Just make sure that you're able to dispose the property or be able to rent it out. So, I mean, that is definitely, it's real. You can't really go wrong with purchasing a condo as an entry level point, and some of the cons though is that you share a wall with somebody. So I don't know, a personal choice. Some people don't like to share walls with people. Depending upon the structure of the building, you may hear everything. You might be sensitive to noise. So you may want to try to find a building that has more concrete that doesn't pick up all the noise. Another con is that you might get a special assessment. I lived in my condo for 15 years. I've probably been hit with 5 special assessments, probably over about $40,000 over the years. But that's because it was a roof job was one of them. So, I mean, that was with my, with my particular condo. If your condo is done well, which your realtor will be doing their due diligence on the builder and reading the meeting minutes, you could tell if it's well ran. You could look at the budget, you could look at, the meeting minutes, and you could tell. So, so just look out for that. The con is definitely a special assessment. I think that would be the greatest con for me with the condo, and that the assessments go up every so many years. So you might start off paying $125 a month, and then it'll go up in 2 to 3 years. It might go up to $130, $140, and depending upon how long you stay there, it might go up 3 to 4% every so many years. So you have to make sure that you're budgeting for that. But yeah, I mean, overall though, I've loved my experience living in a condo. I am looking to move up probably in the next year or so. Not sure exactly what move that would be. It just depends upon where life takes me. But I've definitely enjoyed it. It brought stability to my family, and I am not very handy. So, and I'm a single woman. I didn't want to have to do all of that. So it really worked well for me and where I was at in life. So,
quick question, Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
What are reserves, and why should buyers be concerned about reserves in considering their purchase?
Well, that's a good question, CK. Reserves are very important. It's like the savings account of the building. So when you buy a condo, you are like buying like a share in a corporation. So you're like joint owners in this corporation. And if there are anything to go wrong, you would have to tap into the reserves. And if the reserves can't cover it, that's when the special assessment has to come in to cover, like if you have like a leaky roof, or if you need like driveway repair, or any type of common element repairs that need to be done in the place. You know, the first thing is to have to go into the reserves. And typically, if you want to buy into a condo building, your lender is going to want a certain minimum amount of reserves in the budget. So make sure that, you know, even though it's a nice, pretty building, you know, the budget might be off and the reserves might be off. So it's important that you have at least, I think they say like, I don't know, in a newer building, at least 5% in reserves, older buildings, maybe 10. But don't quote me on that. You probably have to talk to a lender to get to see what the minimum threshold is.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, CK is going to cover townhomes and co-ops.
Okay. Hi, townhomes are a little different than, because you share fewer walls than you do in a condo. Generally, you just share the side walls, and they're oftentimes more vertical living, but if you're not ready for the full single family home experience, they're a great way to go. You just have to be prepared for multi-level living. Generally, they are fee simple, but make sure you know. So there may be no assessments or maybe a minimal assessment that you have to pay to maintain common areas for the development. So if you're ready for it, there it is. Just the vertical living. The co-op experience, co-ops are very common in New York City, couple places out east, and we do have quite a few in Chicago, but they don't compete well with condos. So because co-op, you own a percentage of the entire building. The condo, you own the walls. Inside, you own the unit. But with a co-op, you just own a percentage of the building and kind of have a lease for this particular spot. You also have to go through an interview with the co-op board, and they will be judging your financials to make sure it looks like you're going to be able to be stable and stay there. And they'll also be kind of testing to see if they think you're going to follow the rules and be a good neighbor. So those are the two things they can ask you not to become their neighbor based on that. There's quite a few co-ops in Hyde Park, a few in Edgewater, and there's several that are lower income properties. And that works well for people because they get to live in a nice neighborhood in a nice building, and maybe they don't have a lot of money or the median income of the rest of the people in the neighborhood. So that works well for them. But you've got very high assessments usually because those assessments include the mortgage for the building, the taxes, and all the standard common maintenance issues that come up. So you've got your assessment and then you've got your mortgage payment. It's harder to find lenders who will lend for a co-op because it's not the definition of a house or a townhome or a condo. And usually you have to put down at least 20% of the purchase price to get in. So that's the way co-ops work. Townhomes, you're almost at a single family home. You've just got a couple shared walls, so you hope you have good neighbors that don't turn the bass up too high. Like baby. But there may or may not be rules for the townhome association. It varies. It's a lot more open. So, okay, Maria, you want to talk about single family?
You know what? I had a question, CK. You mentioned something about fee simple. Can you explain to us or in everyone what does that mean?
Usually it means that the property doesn't, let's see. Townhomes are usually fee simple. If you buy a fee simple townhome, usually you have to maintain the roof. Mm-hmm. If it's not fee simple, then the association has to pay for something like that. Mm-hmm. Attorneys determine in the docs whether it's fee simple or not fee simple. Okay. Condos are never fee simple. Townhomes maybe or maybe not, but condos never are. Single family homes always are because there's no shared anything.
Okay.
Yes. I know from my experience too, when my client purchased a townhome that was condo owned, they were FHA approved buyers. So they had to, it needed to be an FHA approved development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and because I was a new agent at the time, I didn't really know that, but the agent didn't tell me that either because they accepted the offer. So that's what happened. So yeah, so just be careful if you are an FHA buyer, if it is condo owned, that you just need to just, you just got to make sure that it is approved.
Yeah, and your realtor can check all of that.
Right.
Too. And I forgot to introduce myself. So I've been a realtor for over 25 years. Since last summer, I live in McKinley Park in what's quaintly called a worker's cottage, and I love it. And I've spent about 20 years in Logan Square in a condo, an apartment, in a little house, and variety of different places. But I'm a huge fan of McKinley Park now. I get anywhere I need to go pretty quickly. And I started out mostly with new construction developments. I've worked with fix and flip, but I've even managed some construction. So I get another little view of how things work that way. So that's me. Maria, you want to talk now?
Sure, why not? My name is Maria Diaz, and I have been in real estate for about 18 years. Wow. I started real estate and property management, and I've been doing sales now for the past 6 years. I have recently relocated to Galewood from the Humboldt Park neighborhood, and I transitioned from a single family home into a condo where I'm at now, and am transitioning again into a single family home that is a Georgian. So excited about that. I like the condo living too. I mean, it's been great to be able to experience both. And I'll be talking about single family homes. So some of the things that you want to consider and think about deeply and weigh out is basically counting the cost. What are some of the things to look for when purchasing a single family home? Firstly would be location, right? I think oftentimes we have our own idea of the location in which we think we want to live in, but then when you look at your pre-approval and then you look at the houses in the area, they may not be matching up, right? So in that instance, it's great to be able to lean onto your realtor and to say, okay, this is my budget. What realistically could I get with this budget? And from there, I think you can target a wide net, if you will, of neighborhoods. And as you get familiar with different neighborhoods, you can kind of zone in. Another thing you want to consider if you have children, if you're a family, are the school districts, right? Because yes, you may be paying a lot more in taxes in a specific area, but you have to consider the school district. If you are in an area where the schools are not strong, oftentimes you're going to pay for private schooling for your children. And at the end of the day, it may offset. So those are some of the things that you need to consider. Another thing that you want to consider is quality of life. And this is something that is I think overlooked oftentimes, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, because you're so excited to have your own home and you can't wait for it to be beautiful. I had a client who worked like in the Hyde Park area and was looking at homes in the Zion area. And the kids went to school in the city. And of course, initially I said, okay, I mean, if you want to look, we can look, right? Because at the end of the day, I work for you. But one of the things that I shared with the family is, listen, your quality of life is going to be shot. You're talking about almost a 2-hour commute to and from work. What kind of life are you going to have? And quite honestly, where do most of your family members live, or people that you live in community with? Do they live in Zion, and are they going to visit you? So those are some of the things that you want to consider when looking at single family homes. Another thing to talk about are, what are the minimum home condition requirements? So I'm sure, as you may or may not know, there are different types of loans. And for FHA and conventional, there are some differences in terms of the minimum physical requirements of the home. For an FHA home, for instance, oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, one of the requirements is a stove. You have to have a stove in the home. Another requirement is that you cannot have chipping paint in the home, as that can, due to lead-based paint hazards and et cetera. On the flip side, if you have a conventional loan, they are a little more lenient in terms of the condition of the home. There is not a minimum requirement of having a stove and things like that. So that's another thing to consider when looking for a single family home, because it can make or break your deal. But there are ways around it. And I always share that with my clients, is if we look at a home that is less than your purchase price, and I'm sure, we'll delve into this a little more in future webinars, but if you purchase a home that is less than your pre-approved price, let's say you've only been approved for $250 and the home is $200. If you were to do a limited renovation loan, you can spend up to $35,000, I believe, on cosmetic repairs or whatever is needed to ensure that the home meets the minimum requirements per FHA appraisal. So those are the things that you want to be sure of. And if you have a realtor that is savvy, they are always going to be looking out for those things. I know when I walk through properties with my clients, if I notice something that I think can be even questionable in appraisal, I take a picture of it and I send it to the lender immediately to see their opinion if they think it's going to pose an issue. So we can be strategic in in how we package the deal. The next point I'd like to bring is, be creative. Don't limit your options when you're looking for a home. A few years ago, I was looking for homes for a family, and they were adamant on a 3-bedroom home. And we looked and we looked and we looked. And one day I showed them a 2-bedroom. They were not thrilled that we were going to look at a 2-bedroom. But let me tell you, that 2-bedroom house, they absolutely fell in love with. It was less than the purchase price that they were anticipating. And once they closed on the home, they were able to renovate it and add that 3rd bedroom. So get creative. If all your bedrooms don't have to be on the 2nd floor or on the 1st floor, you can probably just build a wall and frame everything out in a basement and make a 3rd bedroom, if that is not a big deal to you. And that is why it is absolutely important to make sure that you do have a realtor who is savvy and who can help you think outside of the box, so you're not limiting your options. So that's my soapbox on that. One other thing that I'd like to share with you all is flood zones, right? Anytime you are looking at property, and oftentimes it's been in my experience when you're like by the Des Plaines River, so anywhere in Des Plaines, Franklin Park, those areas, oftentimes fall on what's called a flood zone. And what that means is that these areas are noted by, I believe it's FEMA, and one of the conditions of your loan is that you obtain flood insurance, because it's been noted that those areas do suffer from flood. Now, that can make or break a deal. If you get a house that is way below your purchase price, that may not be a big deal to you. But if you're looking at a home that is close to your purchase price, it could in fact break your deal. Oftentimes, because the flood insurance can run you about $200 a month extra. Okay, so that's something to take into consideration. And lastly, we want to talk about village requirements. In the city of Chicago, you don't normally have to go through village requirements. Through the city of Chicago, you don't have to go through that. But when you go into these smaller villages, such as Elmwood Park, Westchester, Franklin Park, oftentimes before the seller lists the property, they have to conduct what's called a pre-list village inspection. So the village goes in, they check the property to make sure that there are no safety hazards, and also to make sure that you've not made any changes to the home that you did not notify them of or get permits for. So that is how they keep a tight rein on what is happening in their villages. So there's always a pre-list. And if there are items noted on the pre-list, oftentimes those items need to be done before the seller can sell the home. Sometimes you will see on a listing that the seller is pushing that responsibility onto the buyer. You'll see notes that buyer assumes the village requirements, or oftentimes if sellers are aggressive in getting rid of their home, they will take care of it. So make sure that when you are viewing a home that is outside the city, that you obtain a copy of the village report and you notate what it is that needs to be done. Because if it is something that will cost over $10,000 and you already know the seller is not, willing to make those necessary repairs, and you don't have that kind of money in reserves, that may not be a good purchase for you. So that is something that's super important to also consider when you're looking outside of the city. So, overall, single family homes do have their benefits in that you don't have anyone dictating how you live. You don't have restrictions. You don't have to have pet restrictions. You can rent it out if you want to. You can Airbnb it if you need to, so long as you adhere to the local laws for that. However, count the cost. You will be responsible for cutting the grass and shoveling the snow. But if it's something that's not a big deal to you, it is absolutely a great investment to own a single family home. So that is all for me. We can. Keisha.
Yo, Keisha, what you got to say about multi-units?
Hi, everyone. My name's Keisha Williams, and I have been a realtor since, I've been a realtor since 2009. Prior to that, I was in the mortgage industry. So I was helping getting these, the loans approved to buy the property. So that stretches back to 99. So, I've been around for a little while, even though I'm only 25.
Yes.
Anyways, so I'm going to talk about multi-unit. So what is a multi-unit? A multi-unit is basically, and I know every state doesn't have multi-units. Some states are like, what is a multi-unit? Like, what does that mean? Like, I know some areas and some parts of the country have no idea what multi-units are because they don't even have them. But a multi-unit is one property, one building that has more than one unit in it. And some of them are comparable. They kind of look like it could be a condo building, but it's actually one owner for the entire building, or it's owned by one person or one entity. So that's what a multi-unit is. Why choose a multi-unit versus a single family or a condo? I personally own and occupy a multi-unit, and I'll tell you why I chose that route. I chose to go with a multi-unit versus a single family or condo because I just simply, I wanted to have an income property. In my line of work, I get paid commission and sometimes it's not stable. And so having a multi-unit just gives me an extra source of income. So that was my reasoning behind it. It feels great to have a tenant that pays, all or most of your mortgage. So that was my reasoning behind it. And honestly, I must say it's probably one of the smartest financial decisions I've ever made. So, that was my reasoning. And, I guess to each his own, you can, decide which is most important to you. But, for me, stability and having extra income was important. Okay. Now, how do you prepare to become a landlord? Because that is something that you do have to think about if you're thinking about purchasing a multi-unit. Like, you are going to be a landlord. So that means that you're responsible not just for your unit, but the maintenance of the other unit as well. So, stuff breaks, you have to maintain that unit, you have to be available if the tenants need something or, things like that. So are you fit to do that? There's all types of resources out there that you can, take part of to prepare you for that, like little classes and workshops and things like that. So, you want to get with a realtor that can help you with those resources and kind of steer you towards those, workshops and things like that to help prepare you for that. Okay. How to find tenants and how much rent do I charge? Now, again, that's something that your realtor can help you with. If you have a good realtor, they will already tell you how much rent you can collect for that particular property before you even submit an offer on it. So you kind of want to know the numbers before you commit to it. Finding tenants, again, your realtor, can help you with that. Just like that realtor can help you find a property, they can help you find tenants. So, that's definitely something you want to make sure you have a good realtor. Now, as far as location and area, what's the best area to purchase a multi-unit? Now, that kind of depends on you and your lifestyle and like where you work, because you kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of the tenant as well as an investor as well as an owner occupant. Like, you want to make sure you're in an area that you feel comfortable, that that's going to work with your lifestyle. You don't want to commute 2 hours to work, right? But you also want to make sure you're in an area that can produce a good rental amount, right? So you kind of have to balance it out, right? You want to be in a good area where you can get good tenants and good rent, but you also want to, if you're going to live in it, you have to be able to be comfortable with the area as well as, making sure it's not too far from your work and places that you need to go. So that's something you pretty much have to talk to your realtor about. You want to weigh out everything just to see if it's a good fit for you and your lifestyle. Okay. And then the last question is, what kind of financing do I need to purchase a multi-unit? Now, as far as multi-units and financing, you can purchase a multi-unit up to 4 units using the standard FHA or conventional financing, but you cannot exceed 4 units. Anytime you go in over 4 units, it's a totally different type of loan product. So you want to make sure you're staying 4 units and below, and make sure your realtor knows that, so that they know not to show you 5 units or 6 units, because it's a totally different process and it's a totally different financing type. So you're talking about commercial when you're exceeding 4 units. So 4 units and below, you have FHA and conventional products that you can use to finance. So that's pretty much it.
Keisha.
Mm-hmm.
So so there's the situation, where some buyers are looking into like a multi-unit and it's advertised like 3-unit, and then they say they have like a non-conforming or a conforming. You know a little bit about that, or can you tell us more about that?
So basically, when you're working with your realtor to look at properties, like what I do is when I have properties that I'm looking to show my client, maybe they send me some properties that they're interested in. One of the first things that I'm going to look at is to make sure it's zoned properly, because if it says that if it's advertised as a 4-unit, when in reality it's really a 2-unit, then we may have a problem, because the lender is going to consider that like a non-conforming product. So we want to make sure we stay within the guidelines. Now, a lot of times realtors may not always do their research, and so they may just list it as what their seller told them and things like that. That's why it's always important for your realtor to do the research as well, because you don't know what the next realtor's research was. Maybe they didn't do any research. So you want to make sure that you have your realtor do their research and due diligence to make sure it is zoned properly, because you don't want to wait until after you submit an offer and then the lender does the appraisal and then you pay for an appraisal, and just for them to come back and say, no, we can't do this. So it's really important to do that upfront due diligence, so you kind of know what you're getting into, and you don't waste time and money on a property that you can't buy.
Yeah. So what does that mean? So there's a unit that my client was looking at, and it said that the basement is it's a legal basement, but it appears that there's a tenant in there and they have a lease on it, but it's not a legal 3 flat.
So that means so you will have a problem with that. So if it's a legal basement, that's fine, but it's a legal it sounds like it's a legal basement of a single family home. It's not a legal apartment. So that means that the lender would not consider that as a multi-unit. So if you're trying to get financing for a multi-unit, but that lower level or that basement unit is not zoned as a apartment, or in the building itself is not zoned as a multi-unit, then you're going to have a problem. So, you just want to make sure you have a knowledgeable realtor who can help guide you through that process, because not all realtors know what to look for. So you want to make sure, that realtor that you're working with can educate you on that.
Yeah, my client, well, I shouldn't bust the person out, but somebody called the city on them and they had to rip out their basement. And
that's another thing. You have to be careful, because it's a lot of people or homeowners that do work to their properties and they don't pull the proper permits. And then when it's time to sell them, that's when they have all the problems. It comes back to haunt them. And then, you're going to have an issue because you're trying to buy the property, and, the city comes out and see all these things that they've done to the property without permits. So there's going to be fines associated with it. They may make you undo everything. So it can be a bit of a nightmare. So you just want to make sure, your realtor helps you, guides you through that process.
Thanks for sharing. Also note too, like the eviction process, if you have a multi-unit and you buy it and then the basement is not a legal dwelling, but you still went through with it, and then you get a tenant, and let's say that tenant doesn't pay, if it's not a legal dwelling, then you can't even evict them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of different scenarios where you can, not be in a good position, from that, if you decide to proceed anyways, when it's not legit. So, I would think twice about that.
Okay. No, that's good information. Thank you for sharing.
Seems like it would be a big consideration too. If you can get FHA and get a 4-unit, you could buy that building with 3.5% down.
Yeah.
If you go commercial, like a 6-unit, you've got to put down 20%, right?
I believe now don't quote me on this, but I believe when you're buying a 4-unit, I think when you get 4 units, you have to put 5% down on FHA. But it's still relatively a low down payment to buy such a big property.
Yeah.
You know,
You have to be owner occupant though, right?
yeah, that's been you have to be owner occupant with any FHA financing. So yes.
Great. You know, some people, I'm not going to say. Okay, well, you know, so one of the challenges that I have was that they say that if you move from a condo into a multi-unit, they consider that a downgrade. So then I have to prove that I'm really going to be moving into this multi-unit without selling my condo. Have you ever dealt with a situation like that?
Yeah, so basically the way the lender looks at it, like say for instance, and that's why I always tell people it's so much easier to buy the multi-unit first.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, if you decide, you know, down the road that you want to buy a condo or a single family detached home or a townhome, the lender would look at that as it's a realistic change in your life, right? Because if you buy a multi-unit, you know, the lender looks at it like you're probably not going to live there forever. You know, you're probably going to get to a point where, you know, you're probably going to want to get your own space. So, you know, moving out of that multi-unit and then renting out that particular unit and moving forward to a condo or a single family detached home is realistic to them.
Okay.
In the eyes of the lender.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to transition from that multi-unit to detached home or condo than it is to move backwards.
Right.
If you move backwards, they're going to ask for a lot of documentation, and they want to make sure that you're not trying to say that you're not occupying it when you're not trying to get the rate of owner occupant when you're really not going to occupy. So they want to make sure, you know, they're going to ask you for a lot of information. They want to make sure it makes sense and all of that. So, yeah. I always encourage people, if you're thinking about buying a multi-unit, get it before you buy the detached single family home.
Okay.
So.
Okay. That was good. Okay. So thank you, Keisha.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any questions about any of the stuff that we talked about? Is there anything that ran through your mind while we're talking about like the townhomes, the single family, the condos, the multi-units?
No.
Well, let's get off of YouTube.
What's that?
Let's get off of YouTube and talk for a minute.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maria, do you want to conclude?
Yeah. So back by popular demand, we have Catherine Ancora from Guaranteed Rate, who will be joining us on March 27th. And she's going to be speaking to us about lending terminology. So why is it that we get super excited when we hear the term CTC? What does that mean? So if you're interested in more of that, we encourage you to join us on March 27th. And we thank you for taking the time to watch our YouTube/Zoom meeting. And we look forward to seeing you. And don't forget to follow us on the web, on Facebook at the Lighthouse Real Estate Team, or Twitter at LTHSE_Chicago, or on Instagram at Lighthouse Real Estate Team. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Night. Okay, I'm done.